Oh, that's kind of cool.
All right. Welcome to Imperial Advisor episode 22. Where, yeah, we missed 2 weeks ago. I was ill, and, well, ultimately there wasn't a ton of news, so we sort of skipped it. And there still probably isn't a ton of news, but we're going to use it as an opportunity just to sort of reflect on where the game's at and just sort of talk about that lack of news as news in itself, maybe, in a way. Um, and yeah, we'll go for as long as sort of we feel we need to. Hopefully, it won't be as long as some of our episodes. So we've got no Andy this week. Unfortunately, he's ill with the Berlin flu or something of that nature. We've got Justin, Baz, and Owen.
Hello.
What have you been up to, L5 Override, since we last talked to you guys? And I'll put names in the right place. While we go around the table.
I haven't been playing an awful lot, to be honest, because of the way the amount of other games I play and the way the week is arranged. I just, without there being like organized play events to go to, and without there being Codi to practice for, because I'm not going to Paris, I haven't squared off the time to do much with it, unfortunately, and that's the only reason. Is like I need an excuse, and at the moment there's been no organized play events to go to and stuff. There was one on in actually last weekend, but with the snow and everything, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not traveling down there.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, much the same actually. Still playing kind of locally at the weekends and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, even with the 6 and 6, even after the first cycle, it just feels like the environment has been kind of exhausted already, and there's not a huge amount of. It doesn't feel like there's a huge amount of innovation or new directions to really go. So yeah, just kind of counting off the days until the Phoenix pack releases and until we get news of the next cycle, I think. So much the same. Yeah, it's been quiet times.
And Baz? Clean
Again,
shaven
similar.
today?
Yeah, it happens. I normally grow the beard for winter, and then once spring arrives, I'm back to a fresh face. Yeah. The weather over here has been blizzard Arctic conditions, so it was kind of poorly timed. But yeah, I've been enjoying the break too. So I got less than a handful of games in of El Favor. I've been doing other stuff like painting some miniatures, playing computer games, and basically taking a break from it, which is one of the reasons we haven't got any articles up in the last while. But Paris is due up next weekend, so we're super excited about that. Yeah, as Justin said, we've kind of I think we've got the bulk of the work through in the environment. Personally, I think if you want, there's a lot more that could be done. Like you can sit down, take those decks that we think are probably the better decks out there, and then just keep playing those matchups and really get tight on knowing exactly what to expect and how to approach things and how to play things. That's a lot of work. If you look at the guys on Discord who are doing the Discord League, those guys are putting those hours in. But at this stage, I'm not really willing to do the same. As Owen was saying, I don't have a tournament coming up, so yeah, I guess looking. Well, I'm actually enjoying this break. I think we said way back that El Favor is kind of a lifestyle game, and it can quite easily take up everything. So I'm enjoying this bit of free time.
Yeah. I'm kind of in the same boat. I know for me and for my brain that, I don't have the ability to just be 100% on one thing all the time, and I know some people can, and I'm always actually quite impressed and quite jealous of those people, because it's kind of a talent in itself. But I just need to sort of switch things and get excited about something else for a while sometimes, and then come back with fresh eyes and fresh enthusiasm. But to sort of pick up maybe on what we're talking about there, about the sort of meta being, does it feel figured out to you guys? Or, one of the things I find very interesting about games is how you can have a period where there's no patches if it's a computer game, or no new cards in a card game, or no changes, but the meta continues to evolve, and what's strong, in 1 month, goes completely out of fashion and changes. Do you think that's going to happen or likely to happen with L5 War, or is the pool still too small, or is it figured out more so than these other games? What's your sort of view on it? Maybe Eoin, do you have any view on that?
Yeah, I see. I'm not sure if the meta's solved so much as people think the meta's solved, which is its own problem. That at the moment, I think Scorpion are kind of pace setting everybody in that they have put together a very good deck, Frotop and the other guys involved, and it is scaring people. So everyone's attempting to adjust their playstyle to play against that deck, which is great for that deck because it means they're like, awesome. We just get to, play the way we were going to play anyway. And everyone tries to play in a way that counters us. But because the card pool is small, there aren't many options to go, okay, let's left field against these guys and let's play some more cheap guys. People can't play any more cheap guys. There's no more cheap guys yet. So one of the issues that they have is that they're in a position where everyone's kind of trying to design and test around them. They've set the pace for themselves, and everyone is stuck trying to react to them, which is great for them. But I don't know. We'll see. It'd be very interesting to see the results that come out of Paris this weekend. If Scorpion dominate again, we're going to have some issues, some discontent, some other stuff. If they don't, if other people do well as well, and they just make up a sizable, good chunk of the cut, but not a ridiculous cut of the draw, I think people will settle down a little bit, and they'll be. But if it's another Scorpion or half the cut, and then Scorpion win, there'll be a lot of chicken littling, And the lack of news about what cards are coming up when the next release cycle is going to make people even antsier. Because people will be unsure about how long they're going to be stuck with this with the new format or with the current format.
Yeah. Anything else want to weigh in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're taking a look at a metagame, generally you're looking at the extreme poles of that metagame and the general level of extreme threats that you have to counter. So you tend to have to be able to deal with the most extreme decks that are viable within that metagame. And Scorpion represent one extreme insofar as they are probably the extreme of resource advantage and reactive. That's really what defines that deck. You take a look at something like Lion. Lion are probably best defined in terms of extreme dynasty power. They play their game mostly from their dynasty deck with support from their conflict deck. And so, I mean, and Lion would represent another kind of particular threat that you have to deal with in certain ways. And the problem we have, I think, at the moment is that, so far anyway. I mean, Scorpion's axes of attack are so generally applicable and so difficult to deal with. This is what's led to their dominance. And what we have to see coming up in Paris is if the tools are there for other clans to deal with the specific threat that Scorpion presents, while at the same time remaining viable against the general metagame. And this is going to be the real trick. I mean, this was, again, when you're going back to old 5R, that was always the trick. It was always the trick as well, especially for some like certain clans like Spider, who had very, very particular vulnerabilities, like specifically to Dishonor and even to Honor. Actually, they were quite weak against those. So when you took Spider to a tournament, you were in a position where you had to, in a single deck, deal with three quite extreme three quite extreme strategies. You had to deal with extreme Dishonor, extreme Honor, and military. So whether the tools exist, I think the tools do exist for certain clans to an extent. I think you're going to see an awful lot more of Aged Crone coming out of, well, I think she should be probably in every single Lion deck now. And you might see her start to appear as a splash if people start splashing Lion, which might become an option, because she can be devastating against Scorpion. Phoenix have options with Master of Gisei Toshi, possibly supported with one Know the World, I think, maybe in the conflict deck, where they can essentially lock out one conflict against Scorpion. So we'll see if, we'll see if people adopt the tools that are there, and whether those tools, we'll see whether or not they make a genuine impact, or whether the effect just washes out, whether the kind of the general noise of, having 6 other clans to compete against, as well as Scorpion, who are the pace setters, whether those changes wash out and Scorpion still just emerge on the basis of their unique strengths. So it's I don't know. It's I'm looking at Paris with a bit of trepidation, I have to say.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Baz, do you have any particular sort of predictions that or things you expect to see coming out of Paris, or any trends that you've heard?
So honestly, no secret down low. To be honest, I'm fully expecting Scorpion to win, and there is going to be a bit of uproar. There's going to be a bit of Chicken Little, as Eoin was saying. There certainly is the potential for other clans in there. When we were going into Cork, we were aware of the deck. A lot of people put in counter plays into their deck to try work against it, but didn't really have the experience against it, didn't know how to fully adjust their decks. For the most part, there were a few good players who did. So for Paris, there's certainly more scope for that. I think to an extent, you're gonna see Scorpion players working out how best to beat other Scorpion players, and as Justin was saying, that can mean they might be weakening their overall game against other clans, which will give opportunities, especially in the kind of the later cuts when maybe those Scorpion decks will push out some of the others. Now, I'm not expecting those Scorpion decks to become weak to any extent, but they might shift their focus slightly, which might give someone an edge in. You're also having to look at matchups. There are, I think people have talked about Lion as kind of potential options to kind of take down Scorpion, and I've certainly seen a few Lion players say that they've had good results and have been practicing the matchup and feel very confident against that Scorpion deck. That said, they have to be able to do well against those other big decks as well. Frotop was talking in one of his recent videos about the best dragon deck. Are there any other options out there beyond dragon / crab? And his conclusion was no. That it's a deck that the only real opt out against Scorpion is just to try play different. Now, there are a few cards that have gone in, but for the most part, it's just the same solid deck. That deck is possibly a bit of a spoiler to other decks that are trying to take down Scorpion, because you have to factor both those decks in, and they're very, very different decks to play against. So, I mean, I certainly think it's possible for a player to get lucky with their matchups, to have put in the work and experience to know how to play against those Scorpion decks, maybe to get a bit lucky and hit one that's more focused on winning against that Scorpion on Scorpion matchup and go all the way and win. But my expectation fully is that Scorpion will win Paris, and we will have more outcry and people will be super upset. There'll be more talk about banning cards and restricting cards and all this crazy stuff. The reality is we're one cycle in. We're very, very early in the game. Once it is not a matter of problem cards or the Scorpion clan being too good. We're talking about percentages here, and once the Phoenix pack comes in, things are going to shift. Things are going to change. If by the time we hit Birmingham, which I'm not sure how far in, but I believe it would just be that Phoenix pack. I don't think we would have got into the cycles. We certainly haven't heard anything about what's coming down the line yet. But if we get into that situation and Scorpion are still pretty dominant, especially after Phoenix getting what really should be a massive shot in the arm, then those Chicken Little cries, maybe we'll look at them again in a different perspective. Paris, fully expecting Scorpion to win. It's not a problem. Looking forward to new cards, and then we see what happens from there.
All right. So I guess one of the other questions. So we obviously had the intense pre-Christmas 6 packs in 6 weeks. Since then, there's been the Phoenix announcement, which kind of right at the start of the year, but not a whole lot really since then. A little bit around the Stronghold tournament stuff for game stores, but it feels a little bit like there's sort of been a gap in sort of the comms, which was probably not massively forthcoming in the first place. They didn't really communicate a ton about why they were doing 6 weeks, 6 packs in 6 weeks, and they didn't really communicate at the time what the schedule would be for the release cycle after that. We're a little bit beyond that. We're a few months beyond the 6 packs. Do we think that was kind of the right strategy at this point, reflecting on it, Owen, or what would you have any criticisms?
You see, I think it was a good intention. I think they wanted to load the environment up, give a good amount of variety right at the start. I'm not. You see, I don't know what the internal workflow is like in FFG. If they have a bunch of dedicated people all working at Alpha War, or if it's just designers, and then when the designers are done, there are production bottlenecks where they could be like the lads could have the next 2 cycles ready to go, but the production capacity is not there to produce it yet. They've got a big push on to get out Star Wars Legion out, and that's where the majority of their marketing and production is at the moment. They're trying to get that out. It may be when they shifted up the 6 packs in 6 weeks, the intention was, and then we'll fold up the next cycle a little bit further, and then they realized, oh crap, we can't do that because of all the Legion production we're doing and the Legion shipping we're doing. We're not sure. I mean, I'm looking at them producing the novella, which looks really cool, and is going to be out, I think, either in late March or early April. And that looks like, maybe that's a product they can make a little bit more in-house. They can print the promos locally, and they can get the books printed somewhere in the States or something and get everything working a bit faster. I don't know. I think there are issues there in terms of getting everything made that they want to get made. And it got pushed a bit further down the priority track. Alternatively, maybe they looked at the situation and said, okay, we were going to do Phoenix, then we were going to start cycle 2. And they said, actually, Unicorn are in a terrible place. Maybe we should do Phoenix and then Unicorn and then cycle 2 or something. I don't know. I've no insider information on this. That's just what I'd speculate, that they might have been thinking about, well, we were going to do this and then they changed their mind, but we already committed to 6 packs in 6 weeks, so let's still do that. I don't know. I'm not sure the additional. They have not communicated terribly well why they are doing what they're doing. They don't have to, but at the same time, it would reassure people if there was at least some explanation or some little sprinkle of justification dashed over the situation. I mean, I think they want the game to succeed, but I think they're spinning a lot of plates at the moment, and I'm not sure it's at an absolute priority at the moment. Good news, for example, is that the actual next OP kit is landing in America this week. So they're starting their Stronghold tournament series this week. There's a bunch of events going up on Facebook for Stronghold stuff at the end of this week. I don't know when our ones are coming over, but hopefully that means we'll start being able to run little tournaments again, little OP tournaments in the shop. So that'll be good.
Mm-hmm. Justin, looking at the 6 pack to 6 weeks and sort of the general communication with the community, what are your sort of views on where we're at?
Yeah, I mean, overall, I still think the 6 packs in 6 weeks was generally a good idea. Yeah. There were pros and cons to it, obviously. It did heighten the barrier for entry and for with the game for certain people, and that's a shame. But it also provided a significant amount of excitement and interest. And it led to it gave us a more kind of a better picture of where L5R is and where it's going. The only criticism I really have is the lack of communication. Even if you've got nothing to tell people, just tell people you've got nothing to tell people. Just say, just let them know, there's coming for a short while. We've got other things that we're working on, but rest assured, you can look forward to more L5R stuff coming out, middle of second quarter or anything like that. I mean, it's really the uncertainty is what upsets people. I think as long as you know where you are and what the situation is, people are generally fine with it. So that would really be my criticism. Again, the reasons for the 6 and 6, we have no idea what those were. But I think generally the positives have outweighed the negatives. But yeah, just communication. Communication is really important. And that's one thing that AEG, for all its faults, got right. They communicated very frequently. And that's it. Just let people know what the story is and what the situation is. And once people are reassured, they'll, the stress goes away and they'll continue playing quite happily. So
yep.
That's it.
Any other thoughts, Baz?
Players to an extent can get quite needy, to be quite honest. We're a little bit like children who, as soon as mommy or daddy go away for an evening, and we're terrified they're never coming back, and the game is going to be in ruins and everything's on fire. I've just had a quick look over, and I can see over the last 100 or so news postings on the FFG website, there's about 5 or 6 in total are for L5R. These guys are running a hell of a lot of games, and Owen is right. One of their big focuses is pushing out Star Wars Legion at the moment. So you can see just a lot of focus on that. But I also see that there's some recent things popping out for Netrunner. When L5R launched, Netrunner had gone through, I think it was maybe 3 months of nothing, where they didn't even know if they were getting a next cycle. The next set of data packs had not been announced, which was a big kind of shock for them. Now, what had happened in that instance was the designers wanted to redo the core sets, so when they were cycling, they'd put it in a better position. And by all reports, Netrunner is doing pretty decent at the moment. The new sets have been a success, and people are a lot happier with where the balancing has kind of taken things. But as Justin was pointing out, that silence, that bit where we weren't actually hearing anything, was a big problem for the players. The players were terrified that their game was due to be cancelled, that something horrible had happened, which wasn't the case. And I think with us, with L5R players, we've been quite spoilt by FFG for the last while, because there was a real big focus on getting the game going. We did get that rush of blood at the start, which was the full cycle coming out all at once. And one of the reasons we've been told for that was because there is a drop-off, that at the start of the game, players were kind of dropping out because they didn't have the card pool that we're looking for. And this is one of the reasons that they pushed it out. But I think now what we're seeing is that drop-off happen a little bit later, and it's a totally expected drop-off of people just coming in, trying it out, seeing what's about, and then maybe moving on to the next buzz, the next brand new exciting thing. I'm happy that maybe that we're kind of getting it out of our system, that the player base has experienced what essentially has just been a 1 month lull. I can see the recent stories. The 14th of February was when we got the announcement of the fiction. The 7th of February was the last story before that. And, so we've had about a month of kind of no news. One of the things that I had talked about on an early article about what I would like to see them do was for the tournament cycle to actually have a stable pool. And for the most part, they've done that. We had... I think we had PAX Unplugged and Madrid were both caught mid-cycle, and then we're having the new PAX South, the Cork Kotai, and we're having Paris all in a relatively stable environment, which I think is great, because it's given us a lot more time to kind of explore, to find out what's going on, and to see where we can kind of push the game and its boundaries. Now, obviously, you can only do that for so long before it begins to feel a little weighty and there's not much you can do in it. And I can understand why players would feel that they've got there already. So, you know, the push of getting so many packs out early, there was a lot of benefits to it that have paid off, I think. We've got a established environment early enough. I think the drop off that we might have had from people who would have felt that the core set by itself, you know, for 2-3 months would have felt very stagnant. We've passed by that. Now we've got into kind of a further down section where people are kind of feeling that with just one cycle things are feeling a bit stagnant. But I think it was a good idea. If they could get a little bit more news out, that would be fantastic. If we knew when the Phoenix pack was due to hit, we've got a rough idea. I think it's end of this month, is it?
Mid-April, we think.
Mid-April, okay. And if once we start seeing those previews for the next cycle, that's going to set a lot of people's minds at ease. And personally, I'm really excited to see what the clan swords are going to be like, because we found out from the upcoming Phoenix book that this cycle is going to contain the clan swords, which are always a big deal. So yeah, I think they've done good things. I think as players, we're all a bit spoiled. And I think, you know, if we wait a week or two, we'll be buzzing and excited about whatever new, shiny, pretty things that Fantasy Flight puts under the tree for us.
Cool. As long as the Scorpion Clan sword isn't called Ambition, I'm fine with it. Which, I mean, yeah, that's a whole tangent itself. But I think sort of we had a really good comment. It's worth maybe just bringing it up because I think it touched on some of those issues. If I can find it. Yeah, so there's a comment on one of your articles, Baz, which I'll just read it quickly. So, hi Imperial Advisor. It's an off-topic post, more of a question. Recently, the play group at my local friendly game shop has almost disappeared. The consensus is that L5R is like modern architecture, beautiful, precise, and cold. Many players complain about the high variance in the Dynasty deck, the dominance of Scorps, who can skip said phase for a more reliable and effective conflict character party, and the general grind of the game. Several players have jumped ship to Netrunner, which they report is much crisper and with more euphoric moments. Sure, they take a bad beat every now and then in Netrunner, but the pace of the game and the ability to run it back without getting decision fatigued is appealing in a game. Simply put, playing Netrunner is fun, whereas L5R is unforgiving work. Despite going all in on L5R, buying all the cards and playing a good deal, I can appreciate the critique. What do you guys think? Is the game still exciting for you all, or have you started to feel the grind? Baz, I guess you sort of commented a little bit on that, so do you want to sort of lead off on some of your thoughts on that? Yeah. So, you know, whether the game is a grind or not is a bit of a weird one. Where do you get your excitement? Where do you get your buzz out of? Is a tricky one. I can understand where, you know, if you're playing the same games all over and over and over again just to try get it right, you know, that, and maybe for me that's one of the options I could go down. Like, really what I should be doing is taking the dragon deck that I like and then playing it as many times against Frotop's Scorpion deck. Or I think he has another name for it he likes to push, so he doesn't have to take all the credit for it. And yeah, I wouldn't be too excited to think about having to play that, you know, 5 times a day every day for the next 2 weeks. That, you know, I might benefit as a player overall, but that wouldn't really be how I'd like to play the game. I mean, that's also a full-time job, playing five games a day every day.
Yeah, actually that's 5 hours, isn't it? Yeah, if you got a lunch break in between. Yeah, okay.
Certainly a part-time job.
An internship, maybe. You're definitely not getting paid for it. Yeah, so I can understand why people kind of, with games like this, you kind of you get into it. The cards are pretty. You kind of start learning the rules. But you can quickly go deep into a rabbit hole where you're looking at, tournament reports, you're finding out what decks are doing best, and essentially you're no longer just trying to enjoy the game. You are trying to become world champion. And while you're doing that, you're feeling like you really suck because you're comparing yourself against the best players out there, and you're judging yourself harshly when you're making mistakes. Now, comparing that to Netrunner, I think possibly Matt's friends are maybe in that more early stage where they're just enjoying it to enjoy it for the sake of enjoyment. But I think if they stick at it, and if they love that game enough, if they start treating it like a job, they will destroy any love they may have for that game, because you can focus on Netrunner or any game in the exact same way and just become so dedicated to it and trying to get it, perfect. I think the comparisons made between Netrunner and L5R are quite interesting, because L5R does have a lot of decision points. And it can have a sense of decision fatigue on that, because the game is always pushing you into decisions, and after that decision there's another one. It sets the pace itself. Whereas with Netrunner, you essentially have your choice of options you can take. You can always draw a card, you can always click for a credit. There are choices where you can set your own pace. But what most beginning players don't necessarily realize is that by clicking for that credit instead of clicking for a card, you may have just lost the game. And while it feels like you only have to, go on those runs or take certain actions when you're ready for it, not putting yourself in that place earlier can be a problem. The issue is that it feels better because you're avoiding the point of revelation, whereas with L5R, it's a lot sooner. You're kind of forced with those decisions often and early, and when you've got yourself into a bad situation, it's more evident. But I have to admit, I think with Netrunner, it's a lot easier for a scenario to be set up where you've lost and you've got no way out, and you can struggle and you can shake, but you're gone. Whereas with L5R, there actually is it's much easier to get out. That cards cycle in and they will cycle out, and we've seen a lot more games turn, I think, in L5R than we have otherwise in many other games. And before I completely go off the rails, just randomly rambling, the L5R is essentially an hour-long game. Netrunner isn't. But Netrunner is 2 games every time. You have to play a game with the Corp. You have to play a game with the Runner. One point my wife was making earlier, she plays both games and enjoys both games. There is splitting, going 1-1 in Netrunner is something that's a lot more appealing than with hitting your tiebreakers in L5R. In L5R, sometimes you're winning the game because you have the favor and your opponent doesn't. There's no real opportunity to have a kind of a 1-all draw and kind of both walk away feeling good. So maybe that's a bit of a downside, that there's always a winner coming out of L5R, and sometimes it's knives and daggers and real tight. So that can sometimes feel a bit bad. But no, I love L5R. I love Netrunner. Personally, I'm enjoying L5R a lot more. And actually, a comment that Eoin made earlier, and I think he'll probably have a chance to make again, you need a lot more overall game knowledge in Netrunner. Essentially because there's so much hidden information. And again, although you feel a novice can feel like they're doing pretty well and they're doing a good job, whereas an expert will actually understand what's happening and why clicking for that one card rather than that one credit is the right play to make.
Interesting. Spoke like true European. We like draws are good, having winners are bad. Did some party said a draw is like kissing your sister, so you know. Take from that what you will. Owen, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. One of the things I draw from that is they mentioned going back to Netrunner. So this sounds like established Netrunner players who've been trying L5R. There's effectively a new edition of Netrunner out, and they went back to that. They're like, oh man, this is amazing. It fixes so many of the old problems. And they haven't yet discovered all of the new problems. Because there are problems with every game. There's no perfect game, nor should there be one. That'd be terrible. If there was a perfect game, we were all like, well, we just play this game forever. It's like it's the tyranny of the best game. It's like Gloomhaven. It's like, why don't I play another Dungeon Crawler? This one's the best. You know, it's terrible. It's terrible when it happens. But
it's fantastic.
But definitely for me, right? Netrunner. I remember watching people. I played a little bit of Netrunner. My problem was that I never wanted to play Corp, and a friend of mine never wanted to play Runner. So one of our suggestions was, hey, I'll just play one of the tournaments. He plays the other one. It's no advantage. It was a massive advantage. And we're just like, we should just do it that way. Just that part of it didn't appeal to me to playing the Corp, just for a number of reasons. But they're going back to it. I remember cards like Architect and Netrunner. If you ran into Architect at the wrong time, you just lose the game. Because you're just giving the Corp, you've actually just given the Corp 2 actions if you don't break it. So you face check it, and it's like, okay, well, now I've just given my opponent an extra turn. That was dumb of me. You know, there are and I'm sure it still is, in Netrunner, you can make horrible environmental choices. There are games like that which are tough because they require a lot of environmental knowledge and are often very difficult to teach for that reason. War Machine's another one where you're like, oh, I want to be a competitive War Machine player. What do I do? Well, first you lose 30 games in a row because you've got to play against each one of the S-tier warcasters, and each one of them has a trick that if you let them do it, you won't know how to stop them before you play them. They just beat you. So you've got to lose 30 games in a row. And they've got huge problems in their competitive community getting new players in because the cost of learning that is just way too high at the moment. Now, Netrunner has probably reduced that with the new edition. They've taken out a bunch of cards. But I bet the factor is still there. Now, L5R has that as well. But L5R is less gotchas and a lot of tempo play. Because it's quite different in how it manages resources from most other games, there are fewer transferable skills into L5R. So yeah, it is work because we haven't automated it yet. We haven't found out what's the right way to play. That may be one of the advantages of the Scorpion deck, where you know, hey, I've got 2 great conflict characters in hand. I can just immediately pass my Dynasty phase, and I get that extra fate. And I've got an economic edge, and I get to respond to my opponent's play. And wow, this is a lot easier than trying to figure out when to pass and when to buy. You know, so every little trick like that reduces your mental load, frees up resources for thinking about other parts of the game, and reduces cognitive fatigue. We haven't figured out L5R yet. We figured out a lot of L5R, but there's parts of it we haven't figured out yet. And if this game is still going in 5 years, we'll go back and say, oh yeah, we were playing that initial environment entirely wrong. You know, and that will be that'll be certainly interesting to see. So, like, if you're finding L5R a lot of work, I would go play a simpler game for a little while. You know, take a break. If you're finding L5R work, don't play it. Like, or consider why you're playing it. Like, if you're playing it to have fun, and I still play it to have fun when I do play it, grand. If you're putting pressure on yourself to perform in a tournament, so I've got to do this, all these matchups, I've got to tune my deck, I've got to do all this stuff, you're making it a job. And frankly, there are too many fun games around to have one be your job that eats up all your time. It's not a particularly expensive game to play. The problem is, this is the golden age of board games, and the main expense is time. So when you're looking at, well, am I going to play L5R for 8 hours today, where I am going to practice against this matchup where I usually lose, so I have a better chance in the Kodai, or am I going to play 3 fun board games? That's the killer. That's what's going to kill people. That sort of competitive tournament scene, I'm not sure how sustainable it is anymore because the amount of work it might take to get really good at it. For some people, it's probably still there. For a lot of other people, I don't know if it's the same. The other options for having fun are far greater. So I think that's one of the factors there.
And Justin, so what's your view on the? It's sort of a compliment and a criticism in two ways. This idea that it's a sort of very elegant, beautiful, precise game, but it sort of doesn't have the sort of highs and lows. It's a bit maybe clinical at times, maybe a bit sterile.
I think it's a fair observation. I think, again, the comparison to Netrunner, and I think just to other card games in general. In most other card games, your decisions are actually quite constrained. When you are making a decision, there are maybe 2 or 3 other considerations you really have to take into account when you're making that decision. Five Rings is actually quite different in that regard, insofar as you can have a ridiculously branching tree of decisions, that move off. Even if something as simple as declaring a conflict, you go military or political first. Which ring do you take? That decision or those 2 decisions can have any number of other decisions hanging off them. Like if I take this ring and if I go political, what's my opponent going to do? Were they going to go military or political? What ring are they going to take? If they do that, what do I have to do next? And so you're planning out what it amounts to, an entire turn all at once, because so much of that information is actually on the board in front of you at one time. Whereas with other card games like Netrunner, for example, with Netrunner, there is much less. You're generally handling much less information. A lot of and even then with face down ice, a lot of that information is hidden, so you are guessing a lot of the time, which takes which does take a lot of cognitive load off, because if you can't make a rational decision, then there's nothing really to consider, and you just have to make a judgment based on gut feeling or your experience. So I think the decision Five Rings are generally much less constrained than they are in most other games, and because of that does place an awful lot of load on every decision, because you simply have to consider so much more at every juncture of the game. And when we went back, certainly, I think, again, the idea that it's quite a clinical game and quite cold, I kind of agree with that in a lot of ways. I think Five Rings exists on quite an extreme of kind of crunchiness, really. Because there is so much decision making, there are so many decision points. It's a very particular kind of game experience compared to other card games like Magic or Destiny, whatever you're playing. It's a very different experience. And I think it's probably a lot less appealing for most players. I think for certain kind of players, L5R is going to be a dream, because every decision is so freighted, because there are so many decisions. And card variance aside, it is a huge test of skill, just not to make the wrong decision all the time, or at any juncture of the game. And certainly, I think after the Imperial cycle, things have changed a bit. If you went back to the 3-core environment, the game was very, very much about making measured decisions and building up, incremental advantages over several turns, to the point where you would basically turn the corner and the game was more or less yours. That's changed quite a bit, I think, after the Imperial cycle. I think now clans have starts that are simply overwhelming. And that was the case in 3-core, but I think to a lesser extent. I think, again, talking about the variance in the Dynasty deck, yeah, that can absolutely happen. I mean, we've talked about Lion before, and things like, first turn Brawler is obviously, it's just the nightmare for most clans if you're facing a first turn Brawler, especially if Lion is going first. That can completely swing a game just on the flip of a card. And we've obviously, we've mentioned before, we have our reservations and our criticisms of that kind of card design. But it's I think really it's just that L5R is such a very, very different experience and design compared to most other card games and what most other card gamers will have experienced before. And as we said, going way back, that L5R is like a European, it's like a Euro board game. It's a whole bunch of bid mechanics, all kind of jammed together into one really, really, really quite complex model where, you know, the resources are interlinked. And yeah, it presents a very, very dense problem every turn, where other card games, again, like Netrunner, the problem isn't as dense, but and as Owen was saying, but the capacity to instantly lose or win is much, much higher in games like Netrunner. I mean, it can happen on the flip of the card, much more commonly than it would in Five Rings. But that's just part of the flavor of each individual game. Like certain games, you know, thrive on the kind of the euphoric, almost spectator-like quality of the turns and reversals that take place. Like if you take a look at a game like Hearthstone, for example, Hearthstone, I secretly suspect, is designed as a spectator game. I don't think it's really designed as much as a game for, you know, serious competitive play. Although it does have that element to it. It does have a very, very large tournament scene, but the experience of spectating a Hearthstone game is very, very different than the experience of spectating, say, a Magic the Gathering game. Like Hearthstone, it's much more evident what's going on board. Things are much simpler. And when the swings happen, my God, the swings happen. They're enormous. And that's a spectator-based event. Whereas something like Magic, you have to have a huge amount of knowledge of, you know, what the cards are. And you know what's really happening in that game is very, very hard to tell. It's very, very, unless you actually understand the environment, it's quite hard to enjoy that. So you know, so I mean, you do have just different extremes of experience, and I think L5R occupies a very specific niche in that it is a very, very dense game. Lots of decision points. None of those decision points are individually going to turn the game on their own, but they mount up. And for some players, that's super enjoyable. It's a huge test. It's, you know, it's just the kind of thing they enjoy. And for other players, they're just going to run screaming from it because it's not enjoyable for them. But that's great. Like as Owen was saying, there should be no perfect game. And yeah, I mean, Five Rings is definitely, it's definitely a cold game in very many respects. But it's also, you know, in like mechanically beautiful. I mean, beautifully elegant. It's just a difference of experience in what you're looking for in a game, I think. Yeah, and you know, it's a hard game. It's just a very, very tough game, and some players are going to gravitate towards that. Other players aren't. They're not going to enjoy it. So, you know, find what you enjoy. Just like Colm was saying, there are so many games now and so many options. Just find what you love and play that. It's and if Five Rings isn't that, that's a shame. But you know, it's your time. Don't waste it.
Well said. So maybe just sort of one last question. Maybe we've sort of been a little bit critical of some aspects, but well, maybe not really. But just sort of change the tone a little. What are the things sort of particularly looking forward to from, you know, the next sort of, I don't know, 6 months of the game? What sort of gets people excited? Is it a new deck type, you know, particular cards, some of the tournaments, or what's kind of stuff that sort of get you excited, Owen?
Local organized play rolling out, because it means we actually get to do local tournaments again. We actually get excuses to go out and all go out on the same day, and we go to some store and we have a tournament for a day. We play 3 or 4 games and we get to hang out. That's great. More of that. That's coming up. So brilliant. We get the novel by the great Robert Denton, who's doing the first Phoenix novel. And I'm really looking forward to reading that. The promos that are cool. It's good that there's 3 copies of each card, apparently, in the book, because otherwise I was like, well, let's buy 3 copies of the book. Good for Rob, I guess, but you know. But no, apparently each book will have 3 playset, so all good. And then like new cards coming up. I want to see some new cards. I want to see the environment expand. I would love for them to go, actually, lads, you know what we're doing? We're having a Phoenix pack. Cool. Next after that is this box set here, which is a full cycle worth, and it's coming out in 2 months. And that'll be, you know, another 6 packs in 6 weeks, effectively. But actually, it's just a box set, and we just buy that. And that'll be great. I'd be really excited about that. I'll be interested to see what the tournaments are like going forward. I'm not going to make it to Paris, but I am going to make it to the UK event.
Birmingham.
So the Grand Cup in Birmingham, I've got to book that actually, and then I'll see after that where I go. But yeah, like, you know, I'm looking forward to stuff. I'm looking forward to getting to hang out with the community, be like, play a bit more rather than run stuff. And yeah, that's good. More stuff is what I want. More news, more stuff.
Cool.
And I've like, because I want to be involved here. If it was all doom and gloom, I'd be like, saw this, I'm off to play something else. But no, I want to be involved here. Just let me know what's coming up, and I'm very excited about OP coming back.
Yeah. And we probably should have mentioned that it is traditional for FFG to do a big announcement the second we finish a podcast. So,
absolutely, I'm expecting. Yeah, come 9 o'clock.
Make us all look like fools.
Yeah, the main reason why there hasn't been any news in the last month is that we didn't have a show for a month, so it's pretty much our fault. Baz, what are you looking forward to?
So for me, Alpha Wars, it's got this kind of weird spot. Like some of my most favorite games were the multiplayer, sitting around with a ridiculous number of players and playing, you know, a 4-hour game that I would never play anymore. But it wasn't about, you know, straight up duel to the death, you know, competitive play. It was more about kind of telling that story, having a shared experience. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for FFG to do something in that direction. Obviously, I enjoy experimenting with decks. You know, I'll be all over the stats and figures when they come out of Paris. And I love reading any of the kind of strategy articles that many of the guys put out. But I think Alpha Vor is more. It's not just a card game. The background, the community, like, just there's a lot of elements to it that go beyond a simple game. And I'm hoping we're going to see Fantasy Flight embrace that. I would love to see them do a story pack where, you know, it's a big box expansion where, you know, it could be something where 2 or 3 players competitively play to do something, or have a chain of events like they did with Terminal Directive. So there's a story to play out or something like that. So, you know, depending how you can do it, you know, you can kind of sit at home with, you know, your family or friends, you know, and kind of play it out over a couple of weeks. Or it might be something that you might play in a store or an event. So there's a lot more scope, a lot of things that they can do. I'm not sure which way they'll go or what they'll do or whether they'll even look at that. And to be honest, if they never go down that direction, you know, I'm going to have stories. I'm going to have new books coming out, which is fantastic. I'm going to have new characters to explore. And it is, as was mentioned, it is a bit clean and it is elegant in its ways, but I think it's an absolutely fantastic game that really gets my blood pumping. As clean and clinical as it might be, it certainly gets the adrenaline pumping for myself. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all of that and more.
All right, and Justin?
Yeah, actually, just to touch on what Bez said, I'd like to see FFG take a leaf from AG's book and maybe use some of these releases as an excuse to run global storyline tournaments again, which were tournaments which were essentially run in friendly local game stores around the globe, in which the results were tabulated and contributed to an overall result. And with FFG's organized play systems already in place, and with their packs and their tournament kits, I think this would be incredibly simple to do, the right way to get, you know, players involved in the story again. On a purely selfish note, Phoenix, I can't wait for the Phoenix pack. I'm just super excited to see the cards that haven't boiled yet. You know, I'm praying so hard that Tadaka is a conflict character. You know, I'm praying that there are a couple of really cool spells in there that we haven't seen yet, that make the new strongholds really viable out of the blocks. I've heard some rumors, which, if they are true, are ludicrous. Yeah, and by viable I mean obviously tier, you know, S tier tournament crushing. Yeah, we're not talking really playable here. You know, viable is always a euphemism for S tier tournament crushing. There's no. Yeah, there is no simply playable. So obviously, be a dominant tournament force would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. But yeah, looking forward to the novel. Yeah, it's, as I said, just huge injection of cards into Phoenix to really diversify the deck they can build and to, just really expand the scope of the game. And once hopefully again, next cycle comes out, and once that's done, then the game will really start to explode and expand, and we'll start to see a very, very different game. And I'm kind of super excited for the point when almost all, or basically all clans, much like Scorpion at the moment, have the option to play up to 10 quality conflict characters. And how interesting, and just the change that has on the game, because I think once we get to that stage, the game is going to be very, very different to what we're experiencing now. So we've got a very immature card pool, so I'm just looking forward to the card pool expanding a bit more so that the game can really kind of mature into, I don't know, its evolved form, its final form, if not. But I just, as Owen said, I want more stuff. More stuff, please.
Excellent. So I think that almost wraps it up. But do we have a beaver fact?
I'm so out of practice. It's not.
Wow.
I will say it was good weather for beavers this weekend in Ireland.
They're snow fans?
Absolutely. They're great. They're great at snow. Big fat tails. All happy.
Like my cat.
Pretty much. Now.
Come on, Owen, the suspense is killing me.
Absolutely.
While you're finding out, I'll touch thanks on the guys in chat, because it was lovely to have you with us. So the Soldier Token and Blue Sapphire and Zupimo Flag, who have all been sort of chatting away and feeding back, which is always appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, good.
All right, I've installed Eoin. What you got?
Absolutely. Well, what I got is the brain of a beaver is of size relative to body weight. Basically, is a very rough indication of how intelligent an animal is. Folding in the brain, how many folds the brain has, is a much better conceptualization of how smart they are. Encephalization quotient is what is referred to, EQ. And the EQ of the aquatic beaver is 0.9. Which is intermediate between terrestrial rodents of similar size and arboreal rodents such as squirrels. So they reckon that they're about as smart as squirrels. But they're very good at building stuff for reasons that is difficult to figure out. So beavers are probably dumber than they should be, but are really good at building stuff. So who knew? I also would like to just give a very quick shout out to... Dojo Playmats are running a Kickstarter at the moment, doing kind of they're nearly like traditional watercolor pictures as playmats for L5R, though not official, but for certainly a game that's a bit L5R-ish, and it's worth taking a look at them because they're really, really cool looking.
Yeah, shout out to Dave.
Yeah.
All right, so that about wraps it up for us. We'll hope to be back in a couple of weeks post Paris, and we'll see if the sky is in fact falling. But for now, bye from me and bye from the guys.
Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
See you now.